Joining me now is After Hours producer, Kara McKinney. So, Kara, we've talked about Elizabeth Warren and her campaign for a long time in the past, and now here she is. She's finally dropping out, and the reason she says why she's dropping out is sexism. Do you buy these claims?
Oh, no, not at all. If I hear sexism one more time, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like she wants us to forget Hillary Clinton got the nomination just 4 years ago. Just a couple years before that, we had Sarah Palin. She was the VP running with John McCain. We've seen Michelle Bachmann, Carly Fiorina. We've seen plenty of women run, succeed, do well. In President Trump's own administration, he has plenty of women working with him closely, advising him, such as Kellyanne Conway, his daughter Ivanka Trump. So it's really on her. She needs to take personal responsibility at this moment. It's not that voters don't like women or don't want to vote for women. It's that they don't want to vote for her. She needs to stop making this about women and start taking responsibility for the campaign that she's led thus far. For example, voters don't like people who lie to them. Politicians who tell them that their children went to public schools when in fact they went to private schools. They don't like when politicians tell them that they're one ethnicity when they're really not. So these things all accumulated over time. And therefore, she didn't have the backing she needed on Super Tuesday. She had a really bad showing, and now she's gone.
No, I think that's a really good point. And it's kind of interesting, too, because when you look at the Republican side, there was a recent poll of a lot of people who were saying who could carry on the Trump legacy after he were to win, if he were to win in 2020, going into 2024. And some of the upper candidates in that poll were Nikki Haley, Condoleezza Rice. It seems like a lot of these accusations of sexism against the Republican Party are often unfounded. And then when you see these candidates, too, I think it's interesting to point out that they're blaming Democratic voters. They're saying that Democratic voters are being sexist by not selecting these women. So I think that you are onto something when you say that. And now we see Bernie Sanders trying to capitalize off of it. He's trying to say that there's an open door for Elizabeth Warren supporters to come into his campaign. Do you think that this is a good strategy for him?
No. Because as we can see, Warren is not backing him. Warren is still to this day going to the media and calling him a sexist, saying that he's allowing his supporters to get away with saying dangerous things. So and the thing is with Bernie is that he likes to portray himself as he's fighting back against the system. He's fighting back against this elitist mentality. And yet look at him. He's basically crawling his way to Warren supporters saying, please, please come to me. I need your help. Right now, we see the polls, the most recent polling that's coming out from Reuters, and with Warren not on it. And they're showing that Biden is about 10 points ahead, sometimes 13 points ahead of Sanders nationally. When Warren dropped out, her base didn't exactly go to Sanders. Yeah. They're going to Biden in a lot of ways. Yeah. And at least what I'm taking from this is that the progressive mindset, it's not getting the traction it was supposed to, or that the media was saying that it was going to get with voters. We saw on Super Tuesday, not only did Elizabeth Warren not have a great showing, but a lot of progressives down the ballot, ones backed by AOC, Ro Khanna, and Bernie Sanders himself, they didn't do too well. I think for a lot of Americans, especially a lot of Democrat voters, we've had a couple years now to see these far left policies start to kind of gel. We're seeing the far left radical sex ed programs and the abortion, taking away guns. And voters aren't liking what they're seeing, and I think progressives now are starting to pay the price for that, especially when you saw Bernie. He doubled down on his comments about Fidel Castro. That didn't help him, and there you go.
And here we are. We are kind of seeing that play out in real time now. And I think that you're onto something, too. Liz Wheeler always makes this point that I think is very interesting, is that middle-class, suburban, average women don't necessarily agree with these things that are oftentimes being had in conversations. Whether you look at the issue of abortion, for example. I mean, I think it's 80% of women say that they do believe in some form of abortion, but 80% say that they don't agree with the radical kind of position that's taken by a lot of politicians in Washington, D.C. So there's a divide when it comes to real American women and the conversations that are often being had on social media, being had in real life. So I think that's something important to keep in mind, because as we see, for example, Senator Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren kind of falling in the polls, that's happening as a result of a lack of support among women. So I think that there is something to be said there. But as we move into 2022, Senator Bernie Sanders is now trying to use different tactics, saying that he's going to really make women's issues a champion of his campaign in order to kind of appeal to Senator Elizabeth Warren and kind of her supporters as well. Do you think that this is a viable strategy going into 2020?
The funny thing with Bernie Sanders is he's saying, I'm going to be a champion for women. Well, you've got a woman still in the race. How about you drop out and you back her? Put your money where your mouth is. It's just like a couple months ago when Julian Castro and Cory Booker dropped out. His whole thing was, we don't have enough minority representation here. His also big thing is saying that we need to redistribute wealth. He's a wealthy man. He, especially the month that Julian Castro dropped out, he set record-breaking numbers for his campaign in terms of bringing in funding and donations. Did he give any of that to Julian Castro to keep in the minorities in the race? No. Same thing here with the women's vote. He's going to say, I'm a man, put me in charge so I can help women, instead of dropping out and putting a woman in place. For example, I'm a conservative, so I go by ideas, but he's a far left progressive. His whole thing is identity politics, so he needs to start living up to that. And when you see the progressives, you were mentioning abortion earlier, we're seeing the whole idea of safe, legal, rare. It's out the window at this point. It's all abortion on demand for whatever reason up until birth. We saw that with Chuck Schumer outside the Supreme Court. Did you see what those women that were marching with him were saying? Saying that they needed to kill their children in order to advance their career goals. Again, the left's whole position is that women can have it all. They can have the full-time job. They can be these powerful CEOs and at the same time raise all these kids. But then when it comes to abortion, they flip that messaging to women are poor and weak and vulnerable, and once they're pregnant, it's all done. You got to kill your kid in order to become successful. And I think a lot of Democrat voters are starting to see through that fake progressive messaging and saying, it's not really connecting for me.
No, and especially, too, when you talk about Bernie Sanders all of a sudden supporting Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Elizabeth Warren, it's easy to do so when they no longer pose a threat to your candidacy.
Exactly.
I mean, at the time, to your point, as you were saying, he was very much so silent, and now he's trying to kind of capitalize off of that moving forward. But Kara McKinney, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.